In December 2013, I was on the receiving end of an enemy attack in Afghanistan, fighting the same group of religious fanatics that carried out the 9/11 attacks. I sustained a traumatic brain injury, helped my teammates patch up wounds on two civilians, and saw my friend earn a Purple Heart. In that moment, I said internally, God, if you're real and this is the end, please make it quick or get me the hell out of here. And because of that experience, I decided I could never judge anybody for what goes on in their mind when they think the end is near and then they're about to die. But I'm still not a believer. I wasn't then, and I'm not now. I believe there are atheists in foxholes, and I don't believe that there is any need for God in the military. Disagree? We would love to hear your thoughts. Give us a call and let us know because the show is coming right now. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are Talk Heathen. Today is Sunday, November 5th, 2023. I am your host, Jimmy Jr., and joining me today is my co-host, the wonderful Dr. Ben. Ben, how you doing? Ben, you are muted. Or are you?
I am. We're good. Okay.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's good to be here on this very special episode of Talk Heathen today with you. I know we've got a lot of veterans in our community, and I really hope we get a chance to talk to them today because there's some stories like the one you were just saying. I know other people have stories as well, but I'm very excited to be here today.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, so am I. I mean, I love working with you, but specifically today, I really am proud that there is another military member on the ACA, part of the ACA crew, with me, and we can relate to kind of our experiences, not only being atheists, but being atheists in the military. I want to shout out all of our veteran viewers, not just veteran as in longtime viewers, fans of the show, but people who have served in the military. Now, Ben and I aren't necessarily by definition veterans, although we are in the military, but there are people that have done great things. They have come before us. They've given their life to our country, and they have done great things above and beyond, the call of duty. So we want to just take this moment to recognize those folks. And hopefully we get some of you to call in and tell us what your experience is like. Are you a theist that's in the military? Are you an atheist that's in the military or were at one point? And let us know what that was like. This is Talk Heathen, a product of the Atheist Community of Austin, a 501c3 nonprofit organization dedicated to the promotion of atheism, critical thinking, secular humanism, the separation of religion and government. Talk Heathen is a live call-in show, and we have open lines. So get your calls in at 512-991-9242 or from your computer at tiny.cc/call-th. So, Ben, last time we spoke, we talked about, what's better, the Air Force or the Army? Me being the Air Force member, you being the Army member. It's fun for us to kind of go back and forth and pick on each other. I will say that, our relationship is one where we can make fun of each other. But if you haven't served, you don't have the right to come up to Jimmy and say, hey, what about that stupid Army or whatever? No, that's a no-go. That is a no-go. That's my Army. Those are my soldiers, even though I'm not in the Army. And so I will defend them tooth and nail. But I am happy to say that for once, and don't get me wrong, I'm not some big-time college football fan. I don't even really know what's going on. But I did go look in and hope to see that the Air Force beat the Army yesterday, and they didn't. They didn't. The Army clobbered us. So,
right.
Congratulations on that.
See, I was going to say, like, if we're going to find a specific measure to determine which branch is the superior branch in the military, it's obviously, at least compared to the Army and the Air Force, it is the Army today because of the football game. Granted, yeah, right. I know our Navy audience is going to chime in and say, hey, well, but Navy's been crushing it with football as well. And that's conversation for a different time, with the Navy Army game. But I see why the Navy would then think that they're superior, and we can have that chat later. But yes, the Army is still superior to the Air Force, and
Hmm.
that is objective evidence.
Yeah, sure. Uh, you know, I talked about the way that we can poke fun at each other and stuff. And when it comes to the Marines, the Army, Navy, Air Force, we kind of have this history of poking at each other and, kind of putting each other down. But really, I think there is a great deal of respect among the branches. That being said, we can all make fun of the Coast Guard. I'm sorry, Coasties, we love you, but you're the laughing stock of the military service. I have to say,
not
only
anymore.
because
Not
I
anymore.
know,
Space Force
yeah,
exists now.
I know, and so I was getting there. The Coast Guard actually may join us as equals, may join us on the Mount Rushmore of military service, because the Space Force is now somebody that we just get to continually put down. And I'm pretty happy about that. So I just want to say also that while we're here and while we are wanting to salute our veterans and military members, whether they're atheists or not, we should mention that we are not here as representatives of the United States Air Force or the Army or any Department of Defense unit. Not here as representatives of the government, and our thoughts and opinions are entirely our own. And I would never speak for Ben on anything except to say I could probably speak to you on that point. We speak for you on that point. So, our opinions are our own, and we are here to kind of talk about some of the festivities that are coming up this weekend. I know New York City is going to be wrought with celebrations for military members. There's the military parade coming up. The New York Jets are having a salute to service tomorrow night, which is going to be exciting. And there's all kinds of good stuff going on. So, Ben, I kind of was curious, you're in a unique position in the military. You are a doctor, one of the most sought after, one of the most highly regarded positions that the military has. Is there anything about your experience to this point that kind of stands out to you that you can maybe share with me and some of our viewers?
It's interesting because I think everybody's experience with the military is very different depending on your branch, depending on your job, depending on whether you're enlisted versus officer. These are all very distinct things. And I have to say my experience is probably very, very different than yours because of the fact that I entered as a doctor and entered as an officer in a job that is very high in demand, to where they make it a little bit cushy for us so that we stay in. Also, the military medical community tends to be more progressive than a lot of the other communities, and especially the officer versus enlisted side. You tend to see some more progressive people there as well. So my experience has been with a lot of secular humanists, even if they don't take that name specifically, compared to many other places in the military. So I might not have as many stories related to that aspect, apart from the usual medically related stories of people at the hospital who are praying for XYZ and they believe that medicine is a result of a miracle from God and all that, like the pretty normal stuff. But I'm sure my experience is very different in that regard. So I'm curious, Jimmy, if you have kind of thoughts on that particular dichotomy almost between these two facets of military service.
Well, I certainly do. I talk to lower ranking or newer military members, lower than myself, frequently. I just taught a course on military history on Friday. I teach at a variety of colleges and universities in the Northeast. And so what I did was kind of stop the video. There was an old World War II era video of a bunch of early airmen, right? And we all know that the Air Force came out of the Army because, well, it took really bright minds to be able to control aircraft and stuff, and they just couldn't find that in the Army. So the Air Force had to split off and become its own branch. I'm poking a little fun there at Ben, but what I will say is I stopped the video and I said, look at this, look at this video, everybody. A lot of white men, aren't there? But then I kind of turned to the class and I told them to look at themselves, and they didn't represent at all what I was seeing on the video. And I kind of made the point that we are now a multicultural military, one of various creeds, religions, races, of course, sexes. Now that we have women and men serving equally, and I turned to them and said, how much talent have we said no to throughout our history as a military? Right? We've turned so many people away, even in eras that were characterized by segregation, for example. Units that were all black or all white and didn't fight together. We really kind of shot ourselves in the foot, if you will, by not integrating some of those perspectives. And I think that we've come a long way. The military is now, I think, much more progressive than what people traditionally view it as. And that is something I'm very proud to boast. Coming in 2010, when I did as an enlisted airman, I was in an Air Force where it was a don't ask, don't tell Clinton era policy. And now we have transgender people that I have supervised or that are performing roles as doctors. Thank you, Ben. And I think that we can all really look at what the military has become since its inception and the various inroads it's taken to be more inclusive, and really just be very proud that our military is now I think, a pretty accurate reflection of what American society looks like. And so that was kind of my long-winded response there, Ben. But I have a lot of deeply held thoughts, a lot of pride, and a lot of love for the military, for what it's done to me, and for what, or for me, and for what it has done for other people that are nothing like me.
Mm-hmm. And that's a call I would love to take today. If anybody has thoughts about, there's a whole debate going on with the internet of, has the journey to become more progressive, has that made the military soft? And you hear especially a lot of older vets saying that, they're not training as hard, they're not as ready to go fight, they're not as ready to meet the same standards that we used to in the military. So I want to hear if anybody has thoughts about the military becoming more soft because of progressive ideas. I want to take your call, because that's, I think, the type of discussion that we really want to have today as well. Because I think you and I would argue that having more diversity and being more progressive and leaning more into humanism isn't making anybody soft. In fact, it's bringing more cohesion and more morale and like more of an ability to fight together, that I think is an asset. But I know that there's a lot of opinions out there about not being prepared enough to go fight. So do you have any thoughts?
Well, I think that we are more prepared now than we've ever been. We are integrating mindsets from across a large or a wide variety, a wide swath of society. Excuse me, I can speak, and it's kind of giving us a perspective that you wouldn't get if you were existing in an echo chamber. I think this we always often harken back to this time where it was the greatest generation, right? The 1950s, for example. But in those times, people came back from war. African American people, in particular, would come back from war and then be degraded, be downgraded from the heroes that they were back to not being able to drink from the same water fountains as us white folks, us privileged white folks. Different education systems, things like that. And so there was a pool of talent that were operating autonomously without being able to input to other white soldiers that might have made those white soldiers better off. And seeing that I am getting leadership, I am getting really great input from men and women, and the other genders in between, and I am getting inputs from homosexual people, straight people, people of different religions. We have military members that wear turbans and have beards because of their religion, and they are able to contribute to kind of the greater good of military operations. And I think that we are in a much better position. And in fact, the military is seeking those people out because they understand, hey, we have people out there that want to serve, and they are super smart. They're super physically fit. They have a great deal to offer. And why are we just going to turn around and say no? And so better prepared, I think, is the goal and is the direction that we're heading. And I wonder, Ben, is there any maybe specific time or point in your career that you've seen something like this come to fruition? Like, have you been able to point at a specific event or circumstance and say, you know what, we're better off right now because of that person, and that person wouldn't have been here maybe 20 years ago?
Well, I mean, just an example that's coming to my mind is the fact that um, I have a co-resident who was talking a lot about the history of the Navy and how there was a lot of controversy throughout like the 1950s and beyond. And I think the first African American to be commissioned in the Navy like wasn't all that long ago. And there was a lot of back and forth of like who could get that commission. And I'm not as familiar with the full story of it, but the fact that you couldn't even like become an officer and be of a certain race, and that was like this controversy hasn't been all that long ago. I think people that would make amazing officers just were denied opportunities. We saw this all throughout the branches, but I think the Navy was one of the branches that was more behind in this. And it was honestly a little bit surprising to me because you see in a lot of other ways the Navy has been more progressive, but to hear that they were actually farther behind the Army, it was honestly a little bit surprising to me.
Yeah. And, with that, I would say relating that back to kind of like a Christian value system, where the military and our government kind of comes from, the Navy was the first branch to give women the option to wear pants instead of skirts. And that was in 2002. The Air Force didn't follow until 2019. And so up until that point, women had to wear skirts with their dress uniforms, and kind of stick to this idea of gender roles, which I think is ironic because now we really don't recognize gender roles in the military. We've got a variety of genders who serve, and I think we could have really been doing this a long time ago and pulling from that talent pool had we not really been under the thumb of, well, tradition. One of the biggest arguments that I hate to hear is, well, it works. This is the way it's always been done. Why change it? And the reason why we change it is to reach that level of preparation, for the future and for future combat situations where the military would be used, that I think you were alluding to earlier, Ben. And so taking a look at where we can improve and who we can include kind of gets us to that point and makes us better prepared to defend our country if necessary. So, I want to get into our question of the week, actually. Talk Heathen to me. And in Talk Heathen to me, last week, we asked you, complete the sentence. When people say, have a blessed day, I reply. And our number 3 answer goes to Sergio Bastian. When people say, have a blessed day, I reply, may the gods bless you too. Because most of them are monotheistic. So, I think that's pretty good. I mean, which God are we talking about, really? Are we talking about multiple gods blessing you? And I don't even really know. I mean, bless you kind of confuses me. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, Ben.
No, it's funny. I do like this one. It's pretty hilarious. Although I think in real practice, I wouldn't say something like that because, I mean, unless it was somebody who was really trying to evangelize, in that case, I would definitely try to troll them. Otherwise, if it was somebody that just said that and didn't necessarily try to evangelize, I probably wouldn't just intentionally antagonize them. But if it was my family, I probably would intentionally antagonize them with this.
Yeah. Well, people who know where you stand and they still say it anyway. I kind of pick my battles on that one. I was at a wedding and I had a family member who is a member of the clergy come over and try and like bless my children and I was just like, hey, come on, you know how this is going to go. And I kind of just,
Mhm.
turn my back, but I don't know. I mean, that's somebody I know. If it's somebody I don't know, I'm kind of just like it. Well, I would say keep away from my children, but for to the lesser extent that I experience as a military member, maybe going through the gate when I get on base and I encounter "Have a blessed day," I'm kind of just like, all right, thanks, and I take off. So I try not to really engage and I want to pick my battles a little bit more wisely. Pete Rost. I almost wonder if that is supposed to be Pete Roast. But anyway, Pete Rost, have a blessed day. May the force be with you. Yeah, that's a good one. I think that's a great one, actually. Who's to say that Jedi is not a legitimate religion? What do you think, Ben?
I think isn't it technically a religion in some places? Like they've actually met criteria to be a recognized religion.
I know people with dog tags that say Jedi on them. That's how real Jedi is. So you're not wrong for saying "May the Force be with you." I mean, how could somebody can't point their finger at you and say you're being silly? I would just show them my dog tags in that situation. And then Mark Baluk, have a blessed day. You know who'll have a blessed day with me? Your mom. Oof. I don't know. I I tend not to pick on people's moms. I want to leave them out. But I don't know, Ben.
No, this is a funny one. Definitely, it depends on context whether or not I would use this. But yeah, I think it's funny.
Yeah. Yeah. Your mama jokes. I mean, there's always a place for your mama jokes. So Pete, or not Pete. What's it called? Who are we talking about? Mark. Yeah. Just be wise with your jokes. All right. Don't go insulting everyone's mom. But we are going to get to some calls. What do you think, Ben?
I think I want to get my answer to the next question.
Oh yeah, for sure. How could I forget? What do you think? So next week's prompt: what one-liner can one use to get out of the conversation with religious people?
I would say, sorry, you're cutting into my prayer time with Daddy Satan.
Daddy Satan.
Daddy Satan.
Yeah, and speaking of Daddy Satan, I really love how the tent spikes in the background above my head, kind of show my true colors here as somebody who's doing Satan's work with my good friend Ben. But yeah, that is our prompt for next week. So what one-liner can one use to get out of conversations with religious people? Enter your best answer below in the video, in the comments, and next week we will reveal the top 3 answers. So yeah, I am anxious to see what our audience comes up with, but we are going to get to some calls. Before we do that, we have to go to the crew cam. All right. Yes. Hello, everybody. Look at all those wonderful people making it work. So Ben and I don't just show up, like I said last time, and make this whole thing work. The behind the scenes stuff is necessary for this show to be successful. But posturing back to our calls, we are going to take a call from Jonathan, him in Florida, a medical Navy officer who is retired and has a short story. I am thrilled to hear from Jonathan. Jonathan, you are on with Jimmy and Ben.
Hey, Jimmy. Hey, Dr. Ben. Glad to be here. And that's medical.
Hey, thanks for calling in.
So, yeah.
Oh.
But anyway, I just wanted to call in to relay 2 short stories, maybe just one, depending on how it goes. I was in from 1980 to 1992. And part of that was my first Mediterranean deployment. We were looking forward to doing an exercise with the Turkish and stopping at about a half dozen or more ports and, showing the flag, and ended up being about 4 months off the coast of Beirut, cutting gator squares and running vat cans full of food to the Marines at the airport in Beirut, because it was 1982, 83. So, and about 6 months after we left, they had a few explosions. They blew up the barracks, the French embassy, and one of our groups downtown. And we lost quite quite a few people. I wasn't there for that, but they were all my brothers because we were all in that together. So that's one story, and we just passed our anniversary for that. So I just wish that everybody would just remember them and think about peacekeeping forces and what they're doing even to this day. The other one is kind of a funny story, and that is that I was on a disassociated tour, and it was in South America. I was in Colombia in 86 through 89, I guess. Actually, it was kind of 87 to 89. It's about 2.25 years. And as working for the Colombian Navy, their Atlantic Command, they have both coasts like we do. So they have a Pacific and an Atlantic Navy. And while I was there, the embassy kind of assumed that I would help them with when U.S. ships came into Cartagena, because I lived there, and, help them with their briefing on the city, because I knew better than anybody what the city was like. And at the time I did. So one ship came in, and it was an auxiliary. And I'll try and make this short. I can go on sea stories for a long time. But anyway, Colombia was the only country with a Coast Guard attaché at the embassy. For obvious reasons. But anyway, we had to climb up a rope ladder about 3 stories up to get on the deck of this auxiliary ship. Because you're in a little motor boat that we, private motorboat. We go motoring out there in not dress uniforms, but standard uniforms. I'm in my whites, he's in his blues. And we kind of, pulled our hats down on our heads and started climbing up this rope ladder. It was almost as bad as a boarding net. But we're about halfway up, and the commander turns to me and he says, I'm just not used to doing this without a gun in my hand. So that's that story there. So I thought that was pretty telling.
Jonathan, that's great. So first of all, thank you so much for your service. And I am sorry that you had to go through what you went through. I'm sure that that's something that you'll probably never get over. And unfortunately, something that a lot of people just won't understand. So, I think your experience may kind of go along with this idea that, military veterans often don't talk about their experiences. And by the way, I am thrilled that you chose our platform to show up and share your experience. But, a lot of times we kind of get characterized as people who don't want to talk about it. And it's not that we don't want to, it's just that it's kind of hard to relay these things to other people and expect them to understand. And at least in my experience, it's just not something I like kind of reliving if I know that the other person might not be able to absorb everything that I'm telling them. And so I really am glad that you felt comfortable talking to Ben and I and talking to us about that. I don't have a lot of experience working with the Navy. I have some. I did deploy to Bahrain, and I worked with some great Marines and great Navy personnel, and had a wonderful experience with them. When I showed up, of course, the Marines were hard asses, if you will, towards me, being the Air Force guy coming right off the back of the jet. And by the end, it was like, hey man, if you're ever in my area, you got to give me a call, look me up, and of course that's always the way it goes, isn't it? But I really love the Navy. And I love the story that you shared, because I don't think nowadays people can really visualize Cartagena or Colombia. Like probably many people that you run into, if you said, oh yeah, I was in Colombia, that would come up on a map, come up in their eyes or in their mind, as would, Ukraine or Afghanistan. Right. So probably a lot of people didn't know where Afghanistan was on a map 23 years ago. And then all of a sudden, now everybody can probably identify it. And so that just kind of speaks to your experience,
and we drove by it all the time. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but yeah, we knew it.
It's okay.
Something in the Navy you kind of know about,
Yeah.
Funny.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah. So,
I want to thank you as well. My parents were in the Air Force. Actually, my father was a bomber pilot in Korea, B-26
oh,
pilot.
great.
My mother
Yeah.
was a flight nurse. So they met in Busan Officers Club. You know, the Air Force. They,
And you had to,
you know, the first thing they
you had to
constructed.
depart from tradition.
And then yeah, and so you know, our statement is that the Air Force, you know, they get allocated money for an airstrip. First thing they build is the Officers Club and the enlisted mess. And then they start on the airstrip, and when it falls short because they don't have enough money, they'll ask for more money to finish the airstrip. So, so that was fun.
Well, you know, money management, I guess, is an issue for the government sometimes. But you know, one thing that the government does well, I will say, is they keep their forces postured well. Now, I say that with a little bit of bias, I'm sure, but you know, we have a great military, and so I want to kind of kick it over to Ben. You know, Ben, what are your thoughts on Jonathan's inputs there?
Yeah, I mean, those are some amazing stories, and I just want to ask some questions and understand a bit more about your experience. So, were you an atheist in the military, or did that come later? And how did that impact your experience at all? Did it impact your relationship with the other people in your unit? How did that go, if that was the case?
Well, I was on 3 different ships and then the disassociated tour. And as an officer, it was mainly doing a lot of qualifying for this, studying that, you know, and learning new jobs. But what I did do is on my second ship, we had a Protestant chaplain, but he asked me to be the Protestant lay leader for the ship because I was a Unitarian Universalist and understood other religions better than other people, which to me was almost insulting. But I said, you know, there's 2 people in the Navy you don't piss off, the doctor and the chaplain. So just to keep the peace, I said, okay, I'll do it. But I found it was a good experience because there were a lot of people who just didn't like going to church and didn't want to be religious, who would come to the lay services because all we really did was sit and talk. The closest thing to a service I had was put on by one of our Jewish shipmates. And so it was kind of a neat thing. I was still a UU. I didn't really have a theology per se. I tended towards the paganism because of the just because I was exposed to it very young. But I just didn't have a religion myself, but I wasn't an atheist. I didn't know, pretty much didn't care. So it was agnosticism because I was too lazy to figure out my own theology. I was too busy doing other things. It just wasn't an issue for me. And my father was an atheist and a humanist. So I was exposed to that, and I kind of leaned that way, but I didn't really go hardcore with the atheism until about 3 or 4 years ago, when I finally made up my mind that that was pretty much where I needed to be. So that, as far as other atheists in the military, never met many, if I met any at all. The people I met were, you know, it just wasn't talked about in the Navy. It was just tradition. You don't talk about politics. You don't talk about religion, unless you're at a service, you know. And that was it. So the wardroom, those are no conversations. You just do not talk about that stuff. So I really didn't even know what most of my shipmates' religion was, because it's just something in the old Navy. I don't know how it is in the new Navy. I suspect it's different, but it just wasn't talked about. And so it was very easy to be an atheist because you didn't talk about it. And it was very easy to be anything because you didn't talk about it. So that was an interesting change. My first ship was an amphib, like I said. It was a helicopter carrier. We carried 1,800 Marines and 600 crew. So a shout out to my Marine buddies out there. Love you guys, always have. And I stick up for you when we call you, you know, names like Jarheads. So yeah, it's a lousy name to call somebody, but it's an old rivalry between the Marine Corps, who calls us taxi drivers, and the Navy. So that's pretty much it. I didn't run into any real prejudice. I ran into one comical situation, if you can stand another sea story. It stems from
I do want to give you Jonathan, I do want to give you, I will give you the final C story, but I do want to say, just following up on a comment that you just made. So no, it was really easy to be anything in the Navy because nobody really talked about it, right? But what if somebody did talk about it? What was the response or the result of somebody openly admitting? And I say admit because I feel like atheists typically have to kind of keep their beliefs to themselves more often than everybody else. But what would happen if somebody openly admitted that they were an atheist on a ship or in service, or in your experience, was there something different or kind of like a change of attitude towards them?
I think there probably would be. I never experienced that because it was a pretty strong taboo to talk about religion. And if somebody really felt the need to do that, usually it was to define their Protestantism against a Catholic. If they had a Catholic chaplain on board, and only larger ships had chaplains, by the way, back then. The chaplain, if they were Catholic, then they would need a Protestant lay leader to deal with the Protestants. But that's the only time religion came up. It was figuring out whose service they were going to go to if they were having services on the ship. A lot of times, if they were in port, people would go to their own churches, so it wouldn't be a thing. So I never really met somebody who was an out atheist. I think I was the closest one to it, but I had a dodge. I could always, if somebody even asked me like off the ship or somebody who was a friend of mine wanted to know, I would say, yeah, I'm a Unitarian Universalist, which was always the church I was going to wherever I was anywhere for about 35, closer to 45 now years. But I stopped going 10 years before 10 years ago, and I solidied my humanism and atheism about 3 or 4 years ago. 4 years ago, about. So yeah, I never ran into that problem. I'm sure it happens. I would assume that, especially on my third ship, where I had a fundamentalist Christian captain. He did not proselytize on the ship. He did invite me over for Bible Pictionary and dinner at his house. I was his operations officer, so I went. And it was nice and innocuous. There was no preaching. We just were doing, like stories in the Bible and, a little Pictionary and stuff. So I found out that I knew an awful lot more about that particular book than some other people in the room. So it was interesting, but yeah, well, it's one of the books I read when I was a teenager. So, along with the Bhagavad Gita and a bunch of others. Unitarians, were like that, or I was one. I'm not anymore. But
when you reach out and you examine a bunch of other religious texts, that are kind of in contrast to one another, but are very varied, you have a tendency to, be more inclusive toward people. And I'm happy that you read, the Bhagavad Gita and, in addition to the Bible or whatever else you might have come across. So not surprised to hear that you were a little bit more open-minded. Yeah. And that happens. I mean, the open-mindedness comes with that exposure. So, yeah, I wanted to kick it back over to Ben and see if he had any remarks on the conversation that we just had.
Yeah, that's a lot of good experiences, a lot of good food for thought. Because I don't know if people outside of the military don't necessarily understand the cultural shift that you go through when you transition into the military, and where in civilian life you would think yeah, this isn't a big deal. I could just not talk about this thing, or I could just, have these conversations when I want to and all that. It's a lot different. Because you have people that you're around day in and day out, and you basically live with these people. Like these are your team. And there's also, beyond that, there is a lot more restrictions on kind of what is socially appropriate within a work setting in the military. And kind of with that, there's a very distinct culture of what you can and cannot say around people. And a lot of that, of course, is to avoid tension among people that you're working with. But the discussion can get kind of interesting. Like if there are certain things that I would want to advocate for more in the military, it's like I can't as much because, number one, there are restrictions just in general on what you can and cannot do being in the military. And then also it's like having to maintain representation of this bigger organization that encompasses a wide range of people. And so you do have to be a lot more careful about what you say. And I don't know if people recognize that it is so socially difficult to engage in some of these conversations in the military. And I appreciate the stories that you're sharing and the other stories we're going to hear today that kind of give a bit more of that perspective. And this is why we're talking about this. It seems like it's not a relevant discussion point for being an atheist show. But it's surprising how often kind of these topics become issues, but aren't talked about just because of the culture involved. So thank you for calling in and sharing your experiences. And thank you again for your service.
Yeah, for sure.
Thank you too.
Jonathan,
Appreciate it.
I did tell you that we would get to your last little tidbit. If you could make it quick, I'll grant you the stage to kind of share your third story.
Okay, I'll make this quick. We pulled into Naples and we did a trip from Welfare and Rec. I was also a Welfare and Rec officer up to Rome, and part of that trip was a tour of the Vatican and an attendance at the Wednesday day Pope speech at the plaza there. And we were there, and they were going through his blessings, and he said he blessed the officers and men of the USS Incheon, which was the one I was on, and we were with a battle group, an amphibious, a MARG, a Marine Amphibious Battle Group, and representatives from all the ships were there. And the flagship guy had a Catholic chaplain, and our guy was a Protestant chaplain, but he had gone to seminary and met this Catholic priest who was then working for the Pope's office and got our name put on the blessing list. And there was a little friction there on the way home because the Catholic guy couldn't get the Pope to bless his ships, but the Incheon could, and that was a Protestant. So I just thought that was one of the highlights of that trip. So anyway, that's all I got. So great talking to you guys, and I'll see you all later.
Yeah, thanks for your service, Jonathan, and thank you very much for calling in. And so that is going to do it for Jonathan.
We got some super chats too.
Yeah, we sure do. And so we're gonna read some of those super chats. Ben, actually, do you want to take that? I think we've got 4 have come in.
Yeah, I will definitely read these super chats. We've got one from Toy Soldier 727, gives $5 and says 9 years, 11 months, and 9 days. Served with multiple races, religions, sexes, ethnicities, and shared bathroom all the time. Just saying. Exactly, and that just goes to show we can achieve the same mission. With all different varieties of people. And you know what? If you got to share a bathroom with somebody that's different than you, it's probably going to be okay. Then we had another one from Alan Ferguson. That's $10 saying, thanks for your service, Jimmy and Ben. Thank you for the super chat, Alan. We appreciate it. Another one from
for sure.
Ben9 Lives gives $4.99. Says, thanks, guys, for your hosting the show. Sometimes find myself still second guessing my atheist beliefs. Brainwashing runs deep. Thank you for your super chat. And if you wanted to call in sometime to talk about why you second guess yourself, and maybe somebody else can benefit from that conversation too, we'd be happy to take that call. And then Toy Soldier 727 gives another $5 saying, Ben and John, thank you for your service. Thank you for the super chat, Toy Soldier. And then another one from Toy Soldier 727, $5 says, I met Ben and Jimmy, an extra 5 for my disrespect to Jimmy. I figured that John comment was with response to the caller, but we appreciate it. Thank you, Toy Soldier.
Yeah, no disrespect taken. In fact, I'm glad that you gave us an extra $5. So you have absolved yourself, and you know what? Thank you, John, as well. So we're not going to leave him out. Yeah, but we really appreciate all of these super chats, all of the people who want to call in and continue to support the ACA, continue to support veterans and military members like Ben and myself, and some of the people that have called in, and some of the people that we have waiting to talk to us. And we want to just kind of announce or reiterate that the reason for the show today is to honor the upcoming Veterans Day, but honor those who have served, and more importantly, maybe get some of you to call in today. Now, if you haven't served and you still want to talk to us, Ben 9 Lives, I would say today's a good day. If you feel like you've always wanted to talk to us or talk to somebody and you are struggling with your religion, then by all means, we're waiting for your call. But that said, we are going to move to another caller, and we have Ashley, she, her, in Canada. Ashley says there are atheists in foxholes, even in the worst of times. And so I want to talk to Ashley about, exactly what she means by that. Ashley, you're with Jimmy and Ben. How are you? Hey.
I'm good. How are you?
We're doing great. We're doing great. We're having a great Sunday. We are honoring veterans and military members, and happy to hear your thoughts. So tell us, you say that there are atheists in foxholes, even in the worst of times. Can you expand?
Yeah, absolutely. I was raised in the United Church of Canada, which is a very liberal and progressive church. And so the church that I grew up in was always LGBTQ affirming, and I did have LGBTQ members in my family. So while my parents do believe in God, by teenage years I didn't really, and by adulthood I'd let it go completely. So I don't have really any hang-ups with religion besides the harm it does to the rest of the world.
Okay, so you have no hang-ups with religion besides the harm that it does, but are you there?
So now I'm a registered nurse.
Okay. I wonder if you are cutting in and out. Yeah, Ashley, so I don't know if you can hear me right now. I'm going to return you to the queue for a moment. So you are no longer on with us, Ashley, if you're hearing this. You're having kind of a call problem. I can't really hear you, so I'm going to pick you back up. Ashley, you there?
Has this helped?
Hey, Ashley. Hey, you're back with Jimmy and Ben, and you were kind of cutting out a little bit, so I kind of wanted to see if we could restart the conversation. So you grew up in the Church of the United Church of Canada, I believe you said, and it was a LGBTQ affirming church. You stopped believing by about teenage years, and now you're a registered nurse who had a near-death experience. That's what I got so far.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, great. Well, first of all, thank you for your service as a first responder, and I'm super happy to hear that your family, even though they are religious, are open to LGBTQ members. I would like to know, though, how is it that you have come to relate all of these experiences to being an atheist in a foxhole?
Oh, because even in my own personal experience, when I was very near death, I was hemorrhaging and I was passing out. My blood pressure was 40/20, and I didn't know if they would be able to bring me back with blood transfusion. And even then, it went white. I blacked out. It was very similar to sleeping It was not, I didn't see Jesus. I didn't see God, even though I had been indoctrinated with those ideologies as a child. And so that's my personal experience. And then working with other patients, I find the patients that do have a religion, they tend to have near-death experiences. They see their particular God or their particular ideology. And the ones that are atheists like me tend not to see anything, and it's just an experience.
All right. Well, I think this is a perfect segue over to Ben, because I think Ben would probably have a lot to say on a subject like this, being a medical professional himself.
Yeah, I mean, near-death experiences are always an interesting conversation to have. And I guess I'm curious, like, you said you've had some patients that have had NDEs as well. Have you had like kind of prolonged conversations with them about what they believe surrounding that, or did they kind of describe what their experience was like?
With their loved ones, with their families afterwards.
Yeah, because I mean, it's an interesting thing that like you've had your own experience where you didn't believe you had a supernatural encounter in that. But I do know of some atheists that have called in to the show that were even like on the line of wanting to like convert back to religion based on an NDE that did have a kind of religious experience. And it's interesting that even if somebody is atheist, they might still go back to those experiences they had while in religion. So I'm a little bit curious, like, what was this specific experience that you had? Like, do you think you had, like, I guess when we're describing it as a near-death experience, like, there's usually something that you can perceive beyond like the actual event. Like, do you have anything that you think did happen during that time?
Like I said, the room went white and I passed out and went, like, it was like just falling asleep for me, really.
Okay. It's interesting that you've had
really
maybe
sad. I had young children.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I don't want you to have to go into detail that you don't.
Sorry, delay.
Yeah, I don't want you to have to go into more detail than you want to. Although I am a little bit curious about just kind of the context of this event and like a lot of that. But I know that this is kind of your private information as well, and you don't need to disclose any of that. But it is interesting.
No, Ben, I'm happy to talk about anything. You can ask me any question. Like I said, I'm a nurse. I believe in science. I'm also a woman who dealt with infertility and loss, so I'm very open to sharing my story to help other women and people, other families.
Yeah, I guess kind of what led to this near-death experience for you? Like, if you're okay talking about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so my husband and I were hoping to grow our family, and we were trying for another baby, and because we had a miscarriage that resolved itself earlier that year, so I was pregnant again. We were excited, and then 12 weeks we found out no heartbeat. So then I thought, again, I thought that a nurse, I thought I was an informed patient, and I decided to try and let it resolve itself yet again, and that didn't happen. And so then they gave me misoprostol to induce labor. And they did recommend, because it was such a prolonged miscarriage, to do it in the hospital. But I'm like, oh, no, I'll be fine. I'll go home. And within an hour of taking the medication, I was hemorrhaging very seriously. And so by the time I got to the hospital, I had lost enough blood that it was potentially a serious situation. And like I said, by the time I was blacking out in the hospital, my blood pressure was 40/20, and I didn't receive 2 units of blood.
Wow. How many weeks were you at that point?
The fetus had stopped growing at 10 weeks. We discovered that the heartbeat is up to 12 days. So this was now like 16 to 18 weeks where I had retained the fatal demise, as they call it in medical terms.
Yeah, I guess that's an interesting question for me. Like maybe going more into cognitive bias. So you had this happen to you, and then decided you didn't want to use the medication right away. Kind of what stood in your way from going forward with the treatment right away as opposed to waiting?
Oh, yeah, I guess that would have probably, now I recognize it as residual religious or other indoctrinations. Not maybe religion, but, letting the body do things naturally. Birth is a physiological process, and my body should be able to resolve this naturally. I've already given birth naturally at once with a live baby. I've already had a resolved miscarriage. So, just really believing in that kind of toxic mindset that can be popular in mom groups.
Mm-hmm.
That,
Yeah, no,
this is all physiological. Our bodies are made to do this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's definitely something that we get caught up in. And so even though you may not have had like a super conservative upbringing, there are still some I guess not really religious, but just different cognitive biases and different kind of fallacies that are brought up in when people are talking to each other about medical treatment. And even as a medical professional, being caught in some of that same rhetoric, it's just telling that it doesn't really matter. It doesn't really matter what belief system you come from. You can still be caught up in logic like that. So I think it's helpful to hear stories like that.
And in
knowing
the moment when it was happening, I was really regretful. I was like, why didn't I just do the DNC initially or do the medication at the hospital? I mean, when I was on the line to 911 as we were driving to the hospital, I even said that to the lady on the call. Like, I regret all my decisions that have led me here.
So, Ashley, can you,
I did not,
I guess,
God.
say, yeah, right. So exactly. So can you say, like, even, I guess what you're describing is kind of relative to what some atheists maybe feel when they are quote unquote in a foxhole, right? And so you could probably relate to people who think that it's over, but still don't kind of turn to a religious belief, and in that way, your experience is probably similar to theirs.
Yes. Well, and like Ben said, even when we are medical professionals, like I have colleagues that are convinced of ghosts. Even my mother-in-law, she worked in housekeeping in geriatrics. And so she believes, the rooms would go cold, or she felt she'd have coworkers that say that they were alone in a bathroom and something pushed them from behind, where I was like, I've never had any experience like that. I'm very strong in my evidence is very high. To prove that the supernatural even exists. So, I have coworkers that refuse to get vaccinated. I have coworkers that have free birth by themselves, which just, it's crazy. No matter what the ideology it is, it can lead people to believe some really scary things.
So, Ashley, did you happen to catch the introduction to the show that I gave, where I gave an account of my experience being in an enemy attack while deployed? Did you happen to catch when I said that, I thought that I was going to die, and I had kind of internally just thought to myself, God, if this is real, either get me out of here or make this quick, right? And so, what do you think? I mean, what is your opinion on that? Do you think that maybe I became a theist for a split second, or what's your thoughts as far as me being an atheist in a foxhole?
No, I'd still be an atheist because before I got flustered with all my thoughts and calling in, that was my ultimate thought too, that even if we do cry out, it's because we've been given that information as young children when our brains are forming, that there might be something out there. And I think that we always still will wonder. And I don't think in your last moments, if you're like, hey, if you're real, now's the time to save me or prove to me you're real, I don't think that makes somebody an atheist.
Yeah, and I think that's my position. You know, why I was trying to entice people to call in and challenge me on that is because basically I, at that point, had no other place to turn, right? I had nothing to lose at that point because in my mind, it was already lost. I was already on my way out. And so I just decided, look, if everything I've been told is true, if all of the reasons that I've been given throughout my time as an atheist for me being wrong are correct, then now's your time to prove it. If I really am wrong, right? Or if you really are real, help me out, or if I'm going to meet you, at least let me meet you in a way where I don't suffer. So, I would argue that doesn't in any way make me a theist. It just kind of gives this being or this group of beings an opportunity to kind of make me become a theist. And obviously that didn't happen. I did survive, but I have no reason to think that anything above humanity's level, any deity of any kind, helped me out of there. And in fact, it was a matter of months before we even left anyway. So I was still in those situations.
Right.
But yeah, I was kind of, I'm happy to hear you say that. And I think also I wanted to kind of posit this on you. So relating your experience as dealing with pregnancy and maybe almost losing your life, relating that to my experience in the military, I can tell you that my wife, when we had our son almost 2 years ago, she had to go into an emergency C-section. Her blood pressure dropped, the baby's blood pressure dropped, and or heart rate dropped, I should say. And we thought we were potentially going to lose one or both of them. And so they wheeled her out. They tried to flip her over in several positions. They finally wheeled her out of the emergency room, of the delivery room. And on our way to the operating room, she kind of just looked at me, and I gave her a look of confidence back. And, I, at that point, wasn't, reaching out to some kind of higher being. Instead, I felt very safe in that environment because I was in a military hospital being handled by a team of military officers and medical professionals. And it made me feel a great deal of pride for what I belong to. I'm part of this group of professionals from a large kind of collection of jobs and career fields. I was an intelligence analyst at the time. I was dealing with doctors and nurses of different backgrounds in the health profession. And I just took a kind of a step back and said, wow, this is just really awesome, because in the end, my son was born and my wife was saved, and we're a happy family today. And I didn't cry out to some higher being. And so you can take the times where maybe you would turn to a higher being, and then the times where you wouldn't turn to a higher being, and you can't tell the difference between who interfered or who didn't, right? Or what interfered and what didn't. All we have to rely on is the people around us, and which that's exactly what being in the military and being a veteran is about, and so I can kind of relate to you, and I think my wife, of course, could relate more to you in that respect than I can.
Well, that does strike a nerve with me. I feel I was comforted at the hospital because I knew, first of all, they were my colleagues, and I knew that if I was going to be saved, these were the people that were going to do it. And they did. I mean, obviously, I'm still around, and they were able to save my life. So I don't feel like I called out to any deity because I knew that the people that were going to save my life were already in the room.
Right. And that's a point I wanted to expand on too. The fact that, like, it seems like in those emergency situations that reaching out to God is going to be the best thing to do, because obviously if God is the omni God and he's going to have the best intentions, the best way to solve everything, like, why wouldn't you want that? But thinking through all of the stories throughout Christianity and whatever other religion about all of the times that God did not intervene, that's not as reassuring, right? Because what if this is the case that God just decides, no, actually it's better if your kid dies than if you die. But Imagine
Yeah.
like praying to a God that you don't know what his answer is going to be. You don't know if he's going to save you or not, and thinking that that's a better answer than, you know, being confident in the place that you are, like being at a hospital with the people that you know are going to try everything possible to keep you safe. And that is their
Yeah.
one job, is to do that. And they even if they don't have the immediate answer, they're going to do everything possible to find that answer. Whereas God might just say, fuck it. Like, we don't need to go into this anymore. It's
Yeah,
fine.
absolutely.
There's a greater purpose to this. So it is interesting. And you do have a very high risk of complications in general from childbirth. It's one of the most dangerous things that can happen. And oftentimes the more religious people are the ones wanting to have things like home births, which are incredibly dangerous. And I don't want to tell anybody not to go through their own wishes of how they want to have a delivery, but like, imagine if you needed that emergency C-section and you were at home with somebody that was not qualified to deliver your baby, especially not in that emergency kind of way. Like, there's also, I could go on a whole separate track of how ambiguous the term midwife is in the US, because there are
certified, as a Canadian, that is stunning to me.
There are certified nurse midwives that are actually trained. There are also lay midwives that are often very religiously based as well, that will perpetuate this idea of you need to do this as naturally as possible. Don't let science intervene. They just want to harm you and your baby. And people believe that. And then they have these home births, which are super, super dangerous.
And then the cases where the midwife doesn't go to the hospital with them when it goes wrong, and they just ship them off. Oh God, I just watched a court case out of Kansas.
I think,
with a lay midwife.
I think we're talking about the same.
Yep,
we're talking about the same court case. But anyway, either way, that's kind of a sidetrack off of people thinking that God is going to be the ultimate right answer, when if you really think about it, they're like, and even thinking back to something like this is maybe more of a different spin on like Pascal's wager, where you think of like, no, I'm taking the chances of believing in a God that may or may not exist. But like, even if that God is true, are you actually taking a better position for yourself?
Your baby, it's not worth it.
Yeah, I mean, what are the chances that God just, even if you're believing in the right God, that he's just not going to give a fuck about your situation? So that's, I don't know.
Absolutely.
It's getting a little bit morbid, but I don't know if Jimmy has any other thoughts before we wrap up this call. Thank you so much for calling in.
Yeah, I don't, except to say that I really appreciate.
I can talk to you about this topic forever.
Yeah, well, you know, I think that there are a lot of parallels that could be drawn between professionals of the military and in the medical field. So I really appreciate your input and your ability to kind of get personal and tell us about your experience and relate that to the subject matter of the show. And I think this was a great call, Ashley. I hope that you will keep following us and keep calling. All right,
guys. I'm a subscriber for life. As long as you do it, I'll be here.
All right. Excellent. Well, we were happy to talk to Ashley. We do have some other callers waiting for us. And right now, before we get to our other callers, we are going to jump in to reading off our top 5 patrons of the week. Ben, how do you feel about taking the top 5? And then I am going to do the honorable mention, because the honorable mention is somebody who knows me, I think.
Yep. So the top 5 patrons of the week. So just a reminder to everybody that if you want to be on this list, you can go to the link that's on the screen right here, tiny.cc/PatreonTH. And the top 5 people that donate for that week are going to make it onto this list. So this week, they are Dingleberry Jackson, Oops, All Singularity, Devor Valjan, Kalevi Helveti, and Left in the Leaves. And then we have a special honorable mention that Jimmy's going to read off.
Yes, we certainly do. So this week, our honorable mention is going to be somebody called This Old Helmet. And This Old Helmet, if you are watching and you are listening, I would love for you to call in, or contact the ACA, shoot them an email, and they can get in touch with me, and that maybe we can get reconnected, because this old helmet lurks around in some of the comments here and there, and I see him pop up, he or she pop up in videos. And apparently this person and I were deployed together some time ago. We were overseas, and they may very well even be able to speak to the experience I had that I alluded to in the introduction of the show. So I don't know. I think it's pretty cool that there's somebody out there who knows who I am, and who I probably have a personal relationship with, but I just don't know who they are. Hey, if you have my number, shoot me a text. That'd be great too. So yeah, those are our top 5 people that we are. Go ahead, Ben.
Oh,
you something?
I wanted to shout out somebody else before I forgot too. Because there's somebody in the community who would not be able to call in today because of where they're at right now. But this person I met at an atheist conference not too long ago, and his first name is Will. I won't dox his last name, but he's currently on deployment with the U.S. Army, is a nurse and doing some good work out there, but recently has started a chapter of a group for atheists and secular humanists in the military, and they do lectures every so often. They have community meetings, and he's currently doing this on his deployment right now. So props to Will. I think he deserves a shout out. He probably would have called in today had he been on our time zone, but I just thought he deserved a shout out today.
Yeah, sweet. Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, I feel particularly good today about being able to kind of dedicate our time to members of both the atheist and military community. And I hope Will stays safe out there and is doing well. And back to this old helmet, by the way, I said to shoot an email. That's tv@atheist-community.org. So yeah, thank you to our top 5 patrons, our royalty members, who we are well familiar with at this point. And again, Ben and I are fighting over whether it's Davor Valjean or Davor Valjean. And so
the fight continues.
Yeah, for real. All right. So what we're going to do is tell you about some awesome new ways that there are for you to support the ACA. We have a brand new and exciting way by buying an engraved brick and becoming a part of the library's legacy. Please check out this video.
Have you ever wanted to make a permanent impact on the Atheist Community of Austin? Help support our space for free thought by buying a custom engraved brick to be laid on the building grounds to help raise funds for improvements. Our building has stood as a beacon for years, bringing people together. But 3 years of emptiness due to the pandemic have taken a toll, leaving it in disrepair. Help us restore this hub of connection and support by buying a brick. Moses had his stone tablets, but we're doing our own version. Join our brick fundraiser and let your engraved messages stand the test of time, minus commandments. Visit tiny.cc/ACA bricks for more information.
Awesome way to contribute to what the ACA has going on. And we also have a new limited edition t-shirt, Prayer, because God already knows what you want. He just loves to hear you beg for it. Visit tiny.cc/merch ACA to get them now. And available on tiny.cc/ACA flyers are printable call-in flyers. Post these with permission to community bulletin boards so people know they should call our show and defend their faith. If you do not post any flyers, or excuse me, if you do post flyers, make sure to take a snap and a picture of it and send it to tv@atheist-community.org, and we may feature your photo on an upcoming show. And if you happen to be in the Austin area, November 19th, 2023, please join us for the live broadcasts of Talk Heathen and the Atheist Experience. Talk Heathen will be hosted by Christy Powell, Forrest Valkai, and Jamie Boone. The Atheist Experience will be hosted by Forrest Valkai and Jamie the Blind Limey. Doors open at noon, and we hope to see you there. The ACA wants you to know what is going on in our community and that we've got an updated website. Head to atheist-community.org, where you can learn about the organization itself, its policies, and how you can get involved. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel. Enable notifications. Comment below on your favorite caller. So comment below on Ben. I think. Oh well, that's your favorite host, favorite caller. We've got so many good callers. Comment on your favorite host though. That would be Ben probably. Become a channel member. Click the join button below. You'll get custom chat emotes, and you will help perpetuate the mission of Talk Heathen and the Atheist Community of Austin. Send a super chat with a question or comment. We will read as many as we can. And with that, we are going to jump into another call, and we have got a caller named Marcus, he, him from Texas. Wants to know, have either of the hosts had experiences where through either combat or medical circumstances, people changed their religious permissions? And wants to also premise that with if we're allowed to talk about that sort of thing. I appreciate that, Marcus. We wouldn't go into detail that we're not supposed to go into, but I think we can talk about this. So we're happy to have your call. You are on the line with Jimmy and Dr. Ben. How are you?
Good. Just to start off, I want to thank you both for your continuing service, not just to our country, but to the atheist community in general. You guys do a very good job of what you do in both aspects, I feel like. But to get to my question, and it was kind of along the lines, it may be a little more applicable to the actual wording of the question for you, Jimmy. But I was kind of wondering, just in generalized life, I see people who change their religious affiliation because of some significant event that happens in their lives. But I was just kind of wondering, and I don't know, maybe you can change names or circumstances or whatever, but have there been circumstances where, for whatever reason, people are put into a situation that makes them question, much like you said you did when you were injured in that attack? Is that a common thing, or do you find that, or do people even talk about it? I guess I don't know.
Well, I will answer that in two parts. So, number one, getting to the latter part of your question, I would say that I have not seen a whole lot of people change their religious affiliation based on combat or medically induced trauma, if you will. Typically, that is used to, I would say, establish some kind of confidence or reassure what they already believed. And so that's been my experience. I want to caveat that with, I really don't talk a whole lot with people about their injuries and such. It's kind of a thing that really we don't talk about. Sometimes we'll talk about it with each other, but it's more of like a head nod kind of look in the eye type of thing. Like, you can tell that somebody's been through something, and you really don't make them relive that. And to expand on that a little bit, I will say that any time that I am ever asked some of the more cardinal sins, cardinal violations, if you will, when it comes to asking military members about their service, it usually comes from people who are so far removed from military service. I have been asked, have you ever seen any combat? You ever shot anybody? And it's usually from people who are in portions of society. They're really wealthy. They're really well off. They've never served. They have no family that would have ever served, or they've never heard stories like that. Those are, and I'm kind of painting that with a broad brush, but those are generally the times where I get those questions that you just never ask people. But the people who are more familiar with what goes into kind of living through those experiences, they really don't ask it anyway. And so I don't really have those conversations, whether it's with civilians or military members. I do want to kind of talk about something that did happen on a trip that I was on. It was actually a religious retreat. And so I talked about this. My very first time ever on an ACA production was on Truth Wanted. I was with the great Objectively Dan, and he asked me about some of my experiences. And I talked about this camping trip that I was kind of tricked into, right? So I was brand new in the military, and I was living in the barracks on base, and there was a group that always got together on Fridays. There was this married couple, man and woman, and I really didn't put it together that they were religious, or they were representing any kind of church. And so I'd gotten to know them. They always brought food. We were barbecuing, cooking out, things like that. And they invited me on this camping trip. And so I went on this camping trip, and it turned out to be a religious retreat. And there was another kid there that, was religious, kind of, I mean, I think he was questioning, but on that very trip where they started, getting into the Bible and asking questions around the fire about, our faith and how we combat evil, how do we avoid giving Satan a foothold on our soul, things like that. They actually made some pretty racist jokes towards Asian people. And that was, needless to say, incredibly off-putting, but eye-opening, because this one kid that I had just mentioned a few moments ago said, whoa, hold on a second. We are supposed to be like this religious group, this like all loving people, and it's okay to make fun of Asian people. And the person in charge, the gentleman who I believe was some kind of pastor, kind of tried to justify it by like, well, it's just a joke. And I was actually pretty impressed. This guy, or this kid, this other military member, challenged him on that, in front of everybody openly, and told him how wrong he was. And after that, that person continued to question what it was he believed, to the point that a year or so went by and he was no longer religious. He actually identified first as an agnostic and then as an atheist. And I think that experience was a very eye-opening one for him and caused him to really think about what it is he believes, because of the message that is being portrayed. And I think that also speaks to kind of the ways that we are groomed in this kind of lifestyle as we are raised, right? There are certain things you just never hear about until you actually read the Bible. There are certain stories that they purposely don't teach you in church. And once you hear them, you start questioning things. Well, to hear a clergy member make racist jokes towards Asian people, I think for this person caused him to divert away from his religious upbringing. And so that doesn't really get to your question of medical trauma or combat related issues, but it certainly does encompass a departure from faith for a military member, because they were pretty much let down by their clergy. And so that is my long-winded answer to that. Marcus, thank you for sitting through that. I hope you took something away from that. I want to kick it over to Ben and see if he has anything to add.
I don't really have experiences related to this, because it's not only such a taboo thing to discuss religion, but also because I try to be as neutral as possible in all my medical interactions with people. I think, at least in that standpoint, I haven't seen anything specific. Probably more so with regard to coworkers. It's not anything that like I've specifically done or been around, but just the in med school, some other students, and then now some residents, like as they're around more progressive people and more progressive ideas, I think it's kind of a similar situation to Jimmy's story, just not as obvious. I think the more that these people spent time around trans people or around people of different cultural backgrounds or different religious backgrounds, even, like I've heard some people ask some very good questions, and especially I've had some Mormons that have asked some very good questions and have intentionally stepped into probably uncomfortable situations for them with a goal of understanding. And I don't think necessarily it changed their belief at all, but I wonder if it's slowly working in their brains and giving them different perspectives on these particular issues. For a specific example is in med school, we had an outside of class workshop about contraception and specifically IUDs. It was all about how to place IUDs. And we had like a practice mannequin and stuff. And this was not required at all to do. This was just an outside of class thing. And this Mormon student showed up and he participated and he asked questions. And some of his questions were a little bit weird, but it just showed he didn't have any understanding of the issue. But he asked them and he didn't argue. He wasn't defensive about his responses. He was just there to learn. And similarly, I've had interactions with religious co-residents where they've asked about being trans and certain things in my life. And it's Like, I don't know if it's necessarily changed anything for them right now, but it's caused them to think about the differences and think about questions that they want to ask. And they've been brave enough to ask those questions. And I think maybe eventually their minds will change and maybe they'll deconvert at some point. But I don't know for sure. I don't know if they're even on that road. But I think those are more of the realistic examples that I've had experience with. So I don't know if that helped at all.
What do you say, Marcus?
Yeah, it's good. I was just kind of curious because thinking about the question, I feel it's obvious that yes, there are atheists in foxholes. I guess I was thinking of a kind of a related question in are atheists made in foxholes as opposed to starting there as atheist. So, but yeah, I mean, I appreciate all the answers. I'll go ahead and let you guys go. But thanks for the show.
Yep. Thank you. Thanks for calling in.
That was a very interesting final thought to end on.
Yeah.
And I think maybe that could be an interesting discussion for a later episode, going more in detail on are atheists made in foxholes versus do they just exist in foxholes?
Yeah. I actually have never really thought about that before. Because, well, maybe I just am not putting myself in the position to kind of have these conversations enough, you know. They're not easy conversations to have, you know, and
Right.
and you did say taboo, and I think that's accurate, and you know, something that people just try to avoid. So I was really appreciative of hearing you know, some of the stories that we had from our callers, and really delving down into kind of the hard things, reliving those things, and we had some great points, and really glad that everybody tuned in for a Veterans Day special. But right now, I want to remind everybody of the prompt for this week. So remember, what one-liner can one use to get out of conversations with religious people? Reply in the comments and tune in at the beginning of next week's episode when we will hear the top 3 answers. But having said that, I need some love rings. Is anybody going to show us the love rings? Love rings. There they are. There they are. Awesome. Ben, I had a great time working with you today. I just want to say thank you for your service. You know, as both a soldier who I can very endearingly make fun of, but also take pride in. Our Army is great. They need great leaders. They've got great leaders like Ben, great medical professionals, and I'm grateful to you. So I just want you to know that, and I'm grateful to you as somebody who takes on this mission with me to ensure the separation of religion and government, and encouraging free thinking and humanism, secular humanism, through the ACA.
Yeah, thank you for your service as well. And I would happily sit in a foxhole alongside you.
Hell yeah. Hell yeah. So join us on the Atheist Community Discord after the show. And remember, if you don't believe this is your community, we appreciate you being here. But if you do believe, we don't hate you.
We're just not convinced.
All right. Thanks.
We want the truth, so watch Truth Wanted live Friday at 7 p.m. Central. Visit tiny.cc/YTTW and call into the show at 512-991-9242 or connect to the show online at tiny.cc/calltw.